Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the special meeting of the Swanton Village Board of Trustees to discuss our water bond vote for the new pipe across the river on Tuesday, November 1st. First order of business is I'd like to have you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So I guess we're going to begin by having me read the warning, and we have our engineers who've been planning the project for us here to speak afterwards. A Village of Swanton warning. The legal voters of the Village of Swanton are hereby notified and warned to meet at the Swanton Village Complex, 120 First Street, Swanton, Vermont, on Tuesday, November 8, 2022, between the hours of 7 o'clock a.m., at which time the polls will open, and 7 o'clock p.m., at which times the polls will close, to vote by Australian ballot upon the following article of business. Article 1, shall bonds or notes of the Village of Swanton in an amount not to exceed $1,200,000, subject to reduction from available state and or federal grants in aid, appropriations, and reserve funds, be issued for the purpose of financing the cost of making public water system improvements, namely to construct a second water line from the water plant crossing the Missisquoi River to the village. The cost of such improvements estimated to be $1,200,000. The legal voters of the Village of Swanton are further warned and notified that an informational meeting will be held for the purpose of explaining the subject proposed water system improvements and the financing thereof on Tuesday, November 1st, 2022 at 7 p.m. at the Swanton Village Complex, 120 First Street, Swanton. The legal voters of the Village of Swanton are further notified that voter qualification, registration, and absentee voting relative to said special meeting shall be as provided in chapters 43, 51, and 55 of Title 17 and Section 1303 of Title 24 Vermont statutes annotated. Adopted and approved at a meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Swanton held on October 11, 2022, received for record and recorded in the records of the Village of Swanton on October 12, 2022. Signed by the clerk, Diane Day, and Village President, Neil Spear. So now you know what this is about. I think Wayne.
We'll let probably Wayne, you want to just introduce your team? And I'm going to do.
We have Wayne Elliott as our engineer, and he is going to enlighten us on what the project
Well,
is.
I'm here for support, and actually this is Mike Mayer from my office. Mike's been working on the project here, and I'm actually going to have Mike take the lead on the presentation here. We don't have too many people in the crowd here, so I don't know, we'll see if we get any tough questions here.
There's some echoing going on here. My name is Mike Maynard. I'm a project engineer with Aldrich and Elliott. Purpose of this presentation is basically just to give people a quick overview of the project so they can make an informed vote. I realized I didn't include the actual bond vote information in the presentation, so it's right there on the flyer. Tuesday, November 8th, that's next Tuesday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Right here at the Village Complex. So just a little history on the existing water crossing. It was constructed in 1976. It's on the downstream side of the Depot Street Bridge. You can actually see it if you go down there. This is a pretty important water main for the system because it connects. It's the only connection between the two halves of the system. And we'll take a look at the map here. So your water treatment facility is down here. Your reservoir is up here. This is the village down here. This is where most of your users are, and this is that water main crossing on the Depot Street Bridge. You can see it's the only connection. And the consequence of that is if that failed for some reason, you wouldn't have any way to get the water from the reservoir down to the users or from the treatment plant up to the reservoir. And the way water systems work is you sort of need those two facilities working in tandem to function correctly. And so, consequently, if that failed, you'd be looking at a fairly prolonged water service outage across most of your system. It was built in 1976, and those aerial crossings, you're usually looking at a 50-year lifespan. So within the next few years, it needs to be replaced. And then one other issue, just with some of the big winter ice outs we have and some of the flooding we've seen over the past 10 years, it is susceptible to ice damage, and we can move it to a safer place. I think I'm actually going to skip this slide. There's a lot of text. We can just, yep, there. So just to give folks an idea of where the project is going to happen. So this is Foundry Street. It's going to connect to the existing water main right there at the end of Foundry Street, run down Foundry Street to the boat access. Under the river, it'll kind of go behind Marble Mill Park, and then up the end of Webster Terrace, and tie back into the water main on Canada Street.
It's okay.
So this is a view looking down Foundry Street. Foundry Street is actually a fairly convenient place to run this because a bunch of the water mains on Foundry Street are old or undersized, and so those also need to be replaced. Also going to include new curb stops and fire hydrants and some of that sort of miscellaneous work on Foundry Street. And then from the boat access, it's going to go under the river. It's going to be about 15 feet below the bottom of the river. And then it'll sort of resurface or come ashore there behind Marble Mill Park. And I think some folks are probably saying, well, how are you going to put it underneath the river? And we do have a technology available to us now that was not available in 1976, and that's horizontal directional drilling. So it's very similar to drilling a well. The key is that the drill can kind of go in horizontally. It's a steerable bit, so they'll be able to drill that actually down through the bedrock under the riverbed, resurface on the other side, and then pull the pipe in. And one of the benefits of that is you're down in the bedrock underneath the river, where you're protected from flooding and scouring and debris movement and stuff like that. So then once it comes ashore, it's going to follow the end of Webster Terrace. That's also a fairly convenient spot. The village has a bunch of water and sewer already there. And then it'll come up and it'll tie in on Canada Street. That water main on Canada Street, I think, was replaced maybe 5 or 10 years ago. I think in 2013, 2015, sometime around then. So that's a fairly reliable place to connect.
And that one was a 12, or was that a?
That's a 12-inch down there.
So we're gonna, Canada Street was a 12, and the depot end is gonna be a 12 also?
Yep, and it's the whole section's gonna be 12 inches. So I guess the next question is what's this gonna cost? The total project cost is $1.2 million. So that includes construction costs, includes the construction contingency, engineering, legal, administrative, and some of those other miscellaneous costs. The good news is the state has about $400,000 available in subsidy for that. The key with these projects is they need to have approval from voters to make use of that funding. Get a patient here. So like I said, you've got about $400,000 in subsidy for the project. The remainder would, the remaining $797,000 would be funded via a loan with a 40-year term at a 0% interest rate. And you know, if you've looked at like cars or mortgages in the past few months, 0% is a pretty good deal. Your savings there is about $675,000 for principal and interest. The key, just the way the state sets up their funding cycle, the subsidy, this whole funding package actually would only be available through May 1st, so you have to have a bond vote passed before then, otherwise you're going on into the next funding cycle, and who knows what's available at that point.
So the savings again on that, 675,000 in interest savings?
Yep, yeah, so that it's that 0% interest rate, for the base.
In principal, Reg, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the base terms for this would be 2%, so that's what most of the other municipalities out there are getting. So the total cost for the village on an annual basis is about $20,000 a year. Sort of for the standard village residential customer who uses 160 gallons per day, so that's sort of your standard sort of single family water usage. You're currently paying about $475 a year. It's about $40 per month. So with this project, to cover that debt service, rates would go up about $1.50 a month or $18 per year. The way the village structures water rates will be a little bit different for some of the other commercial or industrial or non-village users. One other thing is the debt for these projects, they're paid entirely by the water system customer, so they're not making use of tax funds or the general funds or anything like that.
Like, just to clarify, so that first loan payment would be due until a year after the completion of construction. So, for example, if under construction next year, it would be due start a year out the following year, so roughly 2 years.
So construction's planned for summer 2023. You know, a few questions folks might have. There will be some brief water service interruptions. They'll be fairly short, just the time you need to tie into a water main or cut a water service over. There will be advanced notice to users, so folks won't just, show up at home and find their water's off. There is going to be construction activity occurring on Foundry Street and around Webster Terrace and Canada Street. The contractor will be required to maintain access to people's properties around there. One thing we do have in our contractor, certain limits on the time a contractor can work on the project, and there's liquidated damages if they go over that time. And the goal there is just to make sure it doesn't turn into one of those sort of perpetual long-term construction projects that doesn't end. And then we've got a picture here. I think folks might have seen back there a few weeks ago a barge with this drill out there, and we actually were doing that to check the subsurface conditions under the river to make sure things would work out. So that was kind of a neat process. You don't see that being done very much around here.
What did you find when you did the drilling?
A lot of ledge just right where we thought it. It's pretty much a flat surface, so
Okay, so nothing,
nothing bad.
we did that.
Yeah, that was great. It was definitely worthwhile day.
Okay.
So I guess I'll turn things back over to the trustees. We'll have to answer questions or just discuss this.
I think just to preface it, that after the 2018 flooding, Eugene thought it was should have been a priority to, look at this water line and make that move forward because of the closeness of the ice to that water line, and obviously because of the aging. So this is how we got to where we are today.
I think there's also work proposed for that bridge shortly too at some point.
Yes. Within the next, I think, hopefully,
20 years.
well, no, not 20. Hopefully, within the next 5 years, they're going to do a complete replacement. So.
If you take a minute to, I want to go back maybe 10, 12 years when the existing pipe along the bridge was sagging somewhat, you see, and the system that held the pipe in place was made out of steel or whatever, and it's corroded, so we had to fix it. So I took great interest in that, because that's, you know, our water line. So I went across the river in many days and stood over and sat and found your street and watched. And when they got to a certain section, they didn't dare raise that pipe anymore. If you go across Foundry and look at that pipe, you'll come down maybe 10–20% from the village side, and you'll see a little V in the pipe. That's because they didn't dare pull it up anymore. Now, also going back a long time, now somebody else can help me with this one perhaps. There used to be two. At the time that this one was built, there was one crossing the river, I think at the end of Lake Street. I'm not sure where it was.
Above the dam.
It was above the dam,
Yeah.
and it developed a leak or something, and they abandoned it.
Yeah,
So, you know, so at one time there was two.
yeah.
That one laid on the river bottom.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that one. I wasn't here to observe what happened. You guys can remember that apparently,
Yeah.
especially near your home, huh?
Right out in front of my place.
Yes, I reckon it was.
As you know, we've looked at that upstream as a possible location, but not sure what the status of that dam is moving forward over the next, X amount of years. So where we kind of prefer the downstream location for accessibility and everything.
Well, upstream is not as good a place to tie in as it is down below.
Yeah, you'd have to find a 12-inch line up that way. I don't think there is one, is there?
I don't think on each end, we had to chase that back a little ways. Yep.
But this is a pretty good place for it.
Chris, you want to say something?
And a couple questions. What's your recommendation for the existing pipeline? Abandon it?
Probably leave it, Chris, I mean, as it is. I think probably a better time to kind of really reassess that is when they get around to doing the bridge. I think at
So there'll
that
be
point,
like a valve there so we can bypass it if we need
there probably already is, but I think what you would want to do, I would say, is to keep them both in service. Because that's where the redundancy comes in there. But the time, I think, to really do anything more with that, I think it's important to have two, for Mike said, for redundancy purposes. So time to really do anything with that one is, when they go into rehab the bridge, so, which is a little ways down the road probably.
to. Also, this extra footage here, we need another pump station?
Now, the other water line crossing that we did back 15 or so,
Yep.
that old water line is still operational too.
Yep.
So we still have that system, so
Oh, you mean the one from the
The
reservoir?
transmission main, yeah.
Yeah, I assumed it was. You still use it once in a while?
it's, as far as I know, they're both moving water.
They're moving water now. There's no leaks that have developed. That's good. It's an old pipe. I also suspect that a second line is really necessary, in my opinion. I'm sure I've been at this for a long time, ever since I saw them working on the pipe. I was frightened, actually.
Yep.
However, I think when the new bridge is built, I may not be around, so like I said, I think at the last meeting or so, try to remember to include that pipe with the new bridge plans. Please.
Now, the connection on Canada, is that gonna, and on Depot, is that gonna be an insertion valve? Or are you gonna just put a thrust block and?
Top of my head, I don't remember. I think there may be enough valves there. You can just shut that little section down. I don't remember off the top of my head.
We have a cut and cap on Depot Street Reg, and,
Okay.
can't remember what we were.
I thought we had put a valve there.
Yeah,
I think
Canada
you're right.
Street too, yeah.
On Canada.
There's a remarkable amount of valves right in that area. It's really impressive.
Do you have to give some right of ways?
I think you're pretty much squared away back there. We're trying to stick mostly to the existing easements. There is, we're gonna hopefully acquire a wider easement down Webster Terrace. That's mostly just for the benefit of the contractor. It makes it easier for them, having more space to work, so they make the project cheaper, so. Yeah, the village owns the boat access.
Yeah.
The other end is just Marble Park, so.
So as far as prices go, we got a shock on the bridge repair. We're gonna get the same shock when we go for this, or are the prices pretty close? 'Cause the
Well-
price of the bridge repair doubled, didn't it?
Yeah. So, I
Of course,
guess,
that's the state of Vermont too, so.
yeah, I can answer that a few different ways. So, this is a little bit unique, is that we've got almost the design completed, you know, and we did the subsurface out there, so, you know, this thing, if the bond will pass, this is ready to go to construction, so we had some really good information. We've tried to make sure that's accommodated, so a year ago, you're right, you know, the costs have changed pretty significantly. You know, we're all dealing with supply chain issues. We were able to factor that in when we updated the pricing for the bond vote here to work that in. Instead of, you know, typically we've used 3.5% annually adjustment for inflation, but we're using 7.5%, 8%. So we've moved that number to the start of construction for next spring. We're on track to get that out to bid at a good period of time. You know, we can get good competitive pricing out there. So, you know, we've done the best we can. I can say this year we had, even with all the pricing issues and supply chain issues, we had all of our projects go to construction. Budgets were a little tight in some cases, honestly, but you know, we're in a different period in the last year than I've ever been in my career. So, you know, it's a little bit more unpredictable, but we tried to, you know, make sure we've got that covered as best we can here, you know, with the numbers. You know,
So you got 15% contingency, normally you do 10, right?
yeah, we used to use 10, yep. So just to make sure we get a little buffer in there. Supply chain issues are another part of it too. You know, we want to get this out to bid early because it's taken a while to get materials. We've got some things that took 3 or 4 months or 5 or 6 months. You know, to get valves, hydrants, all that kind of stuff. So that's, you know, something we've just got to work through.
How far down are we gonna go when you're going up Foundry?
Yeah, it's the whole section of Foundry you're covering there.
How deep?
Be about 6 feet. Yeah, maybe a little deeper in a few places, but yeah.
And there's paving, resurfacing, and necessary.
Yep. All the surface restoration, erosion control, you know, with the project too, as Mike said, you've got gate valves, hydrants, new services to the edge of the right of way to connect everybody. So everything in the public right of way is new when you're done. Yeah.
But just to reiterate, I mean, this, you know, this needs to be done. This needs to be done. I wouldn't want to go down the path of having a water line break on the bridge and no water for months through the village, so we should do what we have to do.
Have to tie back into the Fairfield Pond line.
Yeah. That's a rock.
Might have to let the state know about that.
Fairfield Pond.
I think this is the right timing here. Obviously, we need this to happen, but we not long ago upgraded our water treatment plant. So we have capacity, it's working well, it's modern, everything's working good. This seems like the next logical thing that we should be doing, in essence, for the water. We have wonderful water. Tastes great.
I think, just tee that up too, I mean, we have invested a lot in our water system. Our next process is gonna need to be the wastewater,
Yeah.
so.
And I think, Neil, back to your point, you know, good question on the cost. I think, you know, our really kind of message this past year and even moving forward is it's not gonna get any cheaper. You know, the funding is in a pretty good place on this type of project right now for the village. And you know, it doesn't get any less expensive, you know, I don't know where we're headed over the next couple of years, but we really encourage people to move forward. I think everybody, if you go back and ask, they're glad they did, because it's not, you know, the fuel prices just went up another 20 cents a gallon this past weekend, and so it doesn't get any cheaper, so.
Now, the blue group that we use, that's, I don't want to say more reliable or better material than the ductile iron that has been in place all these years.
They've each got their pros and cons, Reg. I mean, it's better from a corrosion standpoint. You know, it's more durable. It's also better hydraulically with the interior because you have the smooth. So they've each got their kind of pros and cons.
Okay, that's, anybody else have any questions? Jen? From the public? Yeah, I'll echo what everybody else has said, now's the time to do it, especially with other upgrades that we're doing on the system, supplying Highgate with water, and that would be a plus for that too. Got to keep ahead of our antiquated system all the way along here, so.
I know we had a discussion today with Dean, we did the tour, because he had budgeted for some insertion valves, because a lot of our valves are corroded and non-functioning, so he's going to strategically place some insertion valves throughout the village, and then that way he can isolate some of our own valves that we can shut down ourselves, but in the coming year he has some others that we need to put in place too. We're hoping to be able to utilize some of the ARPA funds to get that done as well, rather than, because, well, it doesn't fall under the taxpayers, because it would go under the water system, yeah. But still, it would save using that. And those insertion valves too, the company that made them had a fire, so they were backed up in their production, so we've been waiting since summer. And actually, you're gonna come in on the 11th to do some installing, yeah.
Before it freezes.
Before it freezes, yeah. Wait, November's looking, it's not gonna freeze this year, right?
So Neil, that did pose a question for me, because you mentioned the Highgate, I'm assuming when you say Highgate, the airport.
Yes.
Is that already voted and approved and happening, or is that just a preliminary stage still?
That's happening.
That's
Yeah.
happening.
And so it's already, is it the same team doing it? Does it make sense to have it done at the same time? Would it be cost savings if they're doing it all at once? Because they're already
It's
local.
already there.
That's a separate entity up
Yeah.
there.
It is.
Uh,
Yeah, so, good question. We're actually working on that project for the town of Highgate, and timing may be similar. They very well could both be in construction at the same time, but the difference is that the town of Highgate, you know, is gonna be the owner of the infrastructure over there. And there's two completely different funding sources. Actually, there's three. They got an EDA grant, they got a Northern Borders, and they also got V-Trans funding. So the funding sources are completely different, so it really would be efficient, it really work very well to try to intermix the two projects.
So I was just thinking if all the equipment requirement is already in place locally, that it may be a potential small savings even for not trucking and transporting equipment to this location multiple times.
You could find a contractor that would be very interested, if he's already got one of the jobs, very interested in, you know, bidding the other project, because the timing would probably be similar.
Back to back.
Yeah, other than the river crossing, I mean, that digging is, it's all sand out there, it's gonna go quick. So,
Okay.
that's all we're.
Gwen, you want to add anything about financing or anything?
The only thing is I'm working on the water budgets now, not anticipating a rate increase for next year. This $1.50 a month wouldn't go into effect until like 2024,
Yeah.
when the bond payment, like we wouldn't put it into our rates until the bond payment, the year the bond payment's due.
Okay, good.
$1.50 a month, that really impressed me.
Okay.
I figured $10, $12. But I wasn't familiar with the numbers like you are. Thank you for that.
I would maybe just add to it, so it's always a reminder to people that the whole village votes on the bond and the project, but it's the water customers, the enterprise fund that pays back the debt retirement on the project, so.
Another thing I was impressed with was 0% interest
Yeah, where'd that
for
come from?
40 years.
I like that.
That's a good find.
Yes, it is.
50% subsidy, right? The forgiveness.
Yeah, around a third, yeah, yep.
So, well, sounds like a good project, so. So anybody else have anything more to say?
I do.
Diane?
Come out and vote on Tuesday, and if you'd like an absentee ballot, call the office.
Okay.
This is for the bond absentee?
Yep.
Oh, that's, yeah.
Question on that. If we receive ballots in the mail,
Yep.
and we elected not to mail them in, do we bring that completed ballot, or do we come up and just do a new one?
If you come Tuesday to vote with a ballot that you were mailed by the state, you don't have to sign an affidavit, you vote that ballot. If you come with no ballot, you have to sign an affidavit saying you didn't vote the ballot that you were sent and that you're gonna vote a ballot here.
Okay, but you bring your finished state mail ballot, you can bring it here rather than mail it.
Yeah.
So you can bring it here unfinished too.
Right, you can bring it here unfinished, you can vote it here, you can bring it here, you can return it to the town clerk's office beforehand.
Okay, I just had some people ask me that question, that's why.
And a lot of people were mailed the water bond ballot because when they filled out their form, they had checked off that they wanted to receive ballots for all elections. So they did automatically receive a water bond ballot as well.
Okay, that's
But
good.
if anyone didn't get one that would like one, call the office or stop by, there's still time.
And you'll have plenty here.
Plenty here, or show up on Tuesday, November 8th.
And good, you don't need the help.
No, we have everything good, all set.
Okay. You, the engineers are all set. All we gotta do is hope for a good vote next, more ways than one, not just next week. Hope for a good one. So, that being said, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this special meeting of the Swanton Village Board of Trustees.
A second?
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn this meeting, this public meeting of the Swanton Village Board of Trustees. All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion's carried. Thank you very much, and good evening.